Hello and welcome to episode number 137, where I speak with Heather Grzych, the author of the Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. And we cover the 4 essential factors of conception according to Ayurveda. And they are the seed, the season, the region, and the water. So please stay tuned to hear lots more about this fascinating wisdom. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda, Empowering Wisdom of Life. I'm your host, Colette, and in this podcast, I hope to empower you to take charge of your own health by sharing the holistic teachings of Ayurveda, the ancient healing tradition from India. We will also discuss topics like health and wellness, nutrition, yoga, fitness, meditation, breath work, and much more, as well as interviewing lots of inspiring people along the way. My humble wish is to help you to connect to your true nature, to Mother Nature, and to each other. If you like the content, be sure to subscribe to the show, and the new episodes will automatically download for you to enjoy. If you're new to Ayurveda, I recommend you listen to the first couple of episodes where I do an introduction to Ayurveda and the mind-body types. I've also set up a Facebook group for us to connect and to support each other, and I'd love for you to join me over at Elements of Ayurveda podcast group. And now, here's the show. Today's episode is sponsored by Banyan Botanicals. Self-care is important right now, but it's also important to nurture yourself from a place of love, not fear. Abhyanga, or self-massage with oil, is a great way to show your body, mind, and spirit some love. Ayurveda recommends massaging yourself daily to melt away muscle tension, soothe the nervous system, and promote healthy circulation. Daily Massage Oil by Banyan Botanicals is a luxurious blend of Ayurvedic herbs and oils designed with this practice in mind. It feels amazing on the skin, it smells amazing, it's one of my favorite oils, and it's good for all body types. If you'd like to learn more about self-massage or other Ayurvedic topics, visit Banyan's website for lots of free educational content. Banyan is a certified B Corporation that carries a wide variety of sustainably sourced, organic, fairly traded products to support your vibrant health. Do yourself a favor and saves 20% on daily massage oil by visiting banyanbotanicals.com/elements-podcast. That's banyanbotanicals.com/elements-podcast. You can also find the link in the show notes. Hello and welcome to Elements of Ayurveda. I'm very happy to welcome Heather Grzych today, who is the author of the Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility. Heather is a board-certified Ayurvedic practitioner, and she bridges the worlds of conventional and alternative medicine to help women and men heal their physical and emotional lives. Heather is on the board of directors for the National Ayurvedic Medical Association, NAMA, and has consulted with doctors, governments, and insurance companies. She lives in the San Francisco Bay Area and works with women and couples online at heathergrzych.com. Heather, welcome to the show. It's a pleasure to have you here today.
I'm so happy to be here with you, Colette. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. And I have read your wonderful new book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility, and it's just a beautiful read. I really enjoyed it because you're really speaking from your heart. And I'd love for you to tell us, first of all, how you came to write this book on fertility.
Yeah, so I would say that I found Ayurveda probably not quite halfway through my life, but I was in my 30s when I first even heard the word Ayurveda. Mm-hmm. And I had a whole career prior to that where I was working in the health care industry, actually in the health insurance industry, in Obamacare and things like that. And I woke up one morning and 32 years old. I was hungover on a couch with my then husband, and it was New Year's Day. And, like a lot of people do, get drunk on New Year's Eve and be responsible and sleep over your friend's house. So we did that. And I woke up this one morning and I said, I want to be happy and healthy. And because it was New Year's Day, right? I'm not quite a resolution person, but I like to pick a couple words to stick with me through the year. And those were the ones. And then I said, oh no, I said that last year.
Oh.
And I said that the year before, but I don't feel like I'm any closer to that.
Right.
And it really hit me that day. And I was still at my friend's house, and I was watching her in her garden in the backyard. And this is, we had stayed there all day, I think, to watch a football game or something. And at the time, my husband and I were trying to get pregnant, and we were newly married, had been together for many years. And I just had this weird sense about it. Like we were doing it because we thought we were supposed to, rather than because we really wanted to. And I had this little niggling feeling about that, but I wasn't quite conscious about it. So I think all of this experience sort of, it kind of came to a head for me on New Year's Day. And I said, I got to really pay attention to what's going on with this. And so I was highly observant this one day, and I looked at my friend in her garden, and she was just looking at the lettuce. She had rows and rows and rows of vegetables planted in the backyard. And this is in a city, so you don't get like huge gardens, but she had a great one. And she was just looking at the lettuce. And I said, what is she doing? She's just looking at lettuce. And I stared at her and I go, I don't know what she's doing, but I need some of that.
Wow. Right. You could sense that awareness.
Yeah. And just the level of focus. I mean, there were so many things I saw in that moment. The level of focus, the care, the deep, deep, deep curiosity about that plant. How is it doing? Really looking at it. And the next thought that came in my head was, I need to go do a yoga teacher training.
Okay.
And then that sort of led me on my path. So I was in my early 30s at that point. That led me, after doing yoga teacher training, that led me to want to study yoga more. I started studying yoga therapy, and then I found Ayurveda after that. So my bridge was yoga to yoga therapy to Ayurveda. And because in the yoga therapy program, we were taught about Ayurveda. Like I said, I hadn't heard of it before. I was probably about 32 years old. And so, that's a big, long way of describing, how I got to Ayurveda. Now, how I got to study it, I ended up leaving my career. I ended up going to get a master's degree in Ayurveda, and at the time that was happening, I was sort of in my mid-30s. And I was at the point where I was going, okay, am I going to have a child? As most women do when they hit 35, you go, if you haven't had a kid yet, you go, oh my God, am I going to have a kid? I kind of waited a long time. And I forgot to tell you that I ended up getting divorced.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the key thing.
Right.
So we had actually stopped, trying to have a child. We got divorced.
Okay.
And that set me on the course of going like, okay, what do I want from my life? I really felt like I was redesigning my life by studying Ayurveda. I felt like a lot of my programming was somehow not adding up to me being fulfilled. I had the great job. I had the nice car. I had lots of money. I had all of these things, but I didn't have my heart. And so I was on a search to find my heart. And somehow Ayurveda helped me find it. Maybe because the texts are written in poems. Maybe that did it. I don't know. But Ayurveda had my heart. And at some point in my life, I just said, I have to stop making decisions where I'm trying to be so practical all the time.
Right. Interesting.
Yeah. So to get to the book, though, I became very interested in women's health, obviously, because of where I was in my life studying Ayurveda. But also because when I started practicing, I noticed that people were coming to me for, digestive issues or the classic things that people go to an Ayurvedic practitioner for. I just kind of feel like crap, or I have skin issues, or my energy, or I have anxiety, or all the different reasons people come. And yet, when we got to the part where we were talking about menstrual cycles, I would say everyone, if you didn't have a physical, complaint, everyone had some sort of gripe about their menstrual cycle. And I said, wait a minute, why aren't people happier about this? Why does everybody hate their menstrual cycle?
Right.
And I got really curious about that. And that started I would say, I started specifically offering programs for women who were having issues with their cycles. And then after I had my child, I decided to write this book.
Beautiful. Great. Well, thank you. That's lovely to hear that story and how it took place in your life and how it changed your life in a lot of ways. And, I'd love to start, I guess, by talking about why do you think, Heather, that so many women and men are having so much trouble with fertility today? Let's start there and then kind of break it down from there about how to get it on a better path to fertility.
Yeah, I would say in general, we know that people aren't as healthy right now, and men and women. And so when health is at risk, fertility is at risk. So we know that, 70-something% of people have regular digestive issues. We know that people don't take time off of work.
Right.
Somehow we've created a culture for whatever reason. I mean, it could be just that the population is getting so big. I have no idea. But for whatever reason, we've created a culture that people do not seem to thrive in anymore. And that's really sad. And for whatever the drivers are that have caused that, for individuals and for a culture, when I ask women, for example, like, what is your perfect vision of motherhood? And they say, if money wasn't an object. That's always the first answer. So everybody's so stressed about trying to sort of make their life something, whether it's have enough money, have the career they want, whatever those life goals are. It's so interesting to me that fertility in countries where there is war or famine, the birth rates are so much higher. Now, you also have more death, right, in those places. So we have a culture where we live very long lives. I'm talking about the Western culture. I know you're in Europe and I'm in the US. So, but all the other countries, they want to be like these countries, right? So the developing world has created a culture where we want to live long lives. We want to basically behave however we want. And we know that we have technology and modern medicine that will help us out when we've, got some issue that has arisen or some, pattern that we've allowed to go on too long that we didn't pay attention to that becomes so painful that then we need some intervention. So we've created a culture like that. And as individuals, it's really hard to break away from that. It's really hard because it's the norm now. It's the norm to put your body's wisdom off to the side. And I think the reason that people have gotten so into yoga and meditation and other sort of mindfulness practices, or people trying to, learning about Ayurveda, learning about things that are sort of like Ayurveda, like functional medicine or naturopathy, kind of in that direction of Ayurveda, that there's a real yearning to get back to a state of health. There's a real yearning that a lot of people have, and that we're all looking for it. So the fertility piece is going to suffer as long as the health piece is suffering. And I think that you have to be really, really, really rebellious in order to, you have to feel like a rebel in order to get your health on track. Because most people around you are not really healthy. I mean, in regular society, right? If you're going to live in certain communities where they're intentionally focused on certain things, that might be different. But in regular society, we have, half the population's obese. There's this programming that we have, or at least that I had, and I notice a lot of other people have, this programming that says, like, you got to be good, you got to be, there's like a certain benchmark for how you're supposed to live your life. And maybe it's the way we were all parented in some way, but it creates this conditioning that really puts goals and achievement ahead of being.
Yeah.
So that's a piece of it. And then there's the sex piece, because we're talking about fertility, right? I mean, I wrote a book about fertility, so we got to talk about sex. And everybody has their unique challenges with that. So, you have tons of people in the US that feel somehow damaged from their religions, that their religions didn't allow them to, channel their sexual energy the way that they wanted to, or that they made them feel shame, or the parents, their parents made them feel shame, or they've had negative experiences with the opposite sex, in unfortunate encounters of darkness. And so there are a lot of people walking around that have a disconnect from their sexual energy. And the women, because we've been using birth control so habitually, we'll say, for so many decades, that we've gone unconscious with our relationship with our reproductive system as a female, collective. Right? So I just take this pill, I don't have to worry about it.
I know. It's so sad, isn't it, that we have been so disconnected?
It is sad, yeah. And it's such a big challenge, because if you look at, you don't want to overpopulate the earth so much, because we do want to preserve this beautiful planet we're on. And we do know that the more of us there are, the more, we're probably going to ravage the planet, because we do use its resources. And so there's that issue. And if we develop a more conscious relationship with our reproductive system, and also develop this deep, deep, deep respect for nature at the same time, to me, that seems to be the best recipe.
Right, absolutely. And this is what Ayurveda gives us. It teaches us about the importance of that connection to nature, connecting to the circadian rhythms, connecting to our own elements in our own body. And I think this is where Ayurveda can really help us to not only connect to nature, but connect to our own true nature. And in particular, in relation to fertility, about understanding the importance of making sure our body is in the best place possible and fertile to conceive.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I've noticed a lot of people reading the book who don't want to conceive. I had a lot of friends who wanted to read it, people who work in the holistic healthcare field who aren't trying to get pregnant themselves, but maybe their clients are, things like that.
Right.
And it's really interesting because everyone's getting something out of it, because being fertile and having fertility doesn't mean you're going to get pregnant.
Right.
And just being an open channel where you can then make the decisions that will put you in position to either have that happen or not happen.
Right. I think, yes, absolutely. If we're fertile, if our body is rejuvenated, we're feeling that juiciness in our tissues, that not only is it good for fertility, but it's also good for longevity.
Yeah, exactly.
So now getting into the details about what Ayurveda recommends. In Ayurvedic embryology, there are 4 factors, it says, that are essential for the formation of the fetus. And Ayurveda has this, story where it's like having a seed and planting a seed and ripening that seed. So the 4 factors are the Bija, the seed, Ritu, the season, Ksetra, the region or the soil, and Ambu, the water or nutrition. And I'd love now, Heather, to go through each of these and kind of delve deep into each one, and if you could tell us about the Ayurvedic meaning behind each one. So I guess let's start with Bija, with the seed. What is Bija? What is Ayurveda referring to?
Yeah, this is just so beautiful, isn't it? I love it.
Gorgeous. It's a lovely analogy to think of the plant.
It really is. And it's so useful for so many things in life, whether you're starting a business or trying to create a baby or trying to take care of yourself even.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the Bija is the seed, and in its literal, I do talk in the book about the literal, translations of each of these factors, but I also talk about sort of the macrocosm effect.
Great.
For them. So the Bija is the sperm and the ovum, right? So we know that the males, and it's interesting the way that the Ayurvedic texts, I think, were a little bit maybe didn't have all the information about the microbiology piece. I think they had the great intuition of what was happening in a body.
Yeah, it's always amazing what they understood thousands of years ago before any microscopes or any technology.
Yeah, and in fact, as we become a more technological society, it's like we lose that intuition more and more, right? We lose the sensory piece, so we like put a Fitbit on our wrist so true. Yeah, the egg and the sperm. And we know that, what modern science tells us today about the seeds is that the ovum is created as the germ cell, while the woman, the potential mother, is actually a fetus.
That blew my mind in the book. Sorry to interrupt, but that blew my mind.
Yeah. And it blew my mind when I first heard about it, so now that's one of the benefits. Okay. You can look inside an ovary of a fetus and you could see that there's actually the germ cells, that the primordial follicles are in there with the ovum in there. So that's amazing to know that if you're a woman, your eggs, your potential seeds were actually planted in you when your mom was making your body.
This is amazing.
And that's different than men. And I want to preface everything that I'm saying. I wrote based on the modern understanding, the modern biological understanding of the egg and the sperm, but I think there's still more to learn here. So I will, I'm reflecting that right now. So the sperm is different than the egg in terms of when it starts to, when it begins to germinate, when that seed is planted. boys or men actually start to develop the sperm when they hit puberty.
Mm.
So they aren't born with their sperm, as far as we know.
Right.
So it's different.
Mm. Yeah, it was so amazing. So what our mothers ate and what they did, their lifestyle and everything they did when they were pregnant with us, those tissues formed, those cells formed our follicles.
Totally.
That's just amazing.
Yeah. So you could actually say that your child is your mother's kid or part your mother's kid, right?
Yeah. I know,
obviously there's a bunch
stuff.
Exactly. Yeah. There's other stuff mixed in there.
Mm-hmm.
But a big part of it is from your mom, if you're a woman.
Yeah.
And in fact, I've had a client who I worked with who was trying to get pregnant for about 4 years. And, we were working together for about, I think, 4 months. And she actually just gave up altogether. She was so angry with her mother that she couldn't get pregnant because she was in her early 40s. She didn't get off the pill, I think, until she was 38. And she had tried to get pregnant after that. And so she was in her early 40s. She'd gone through IVF. She was still going through IVF, everything. And she was so mad that she wasn't able to, her ovarian reserve was so low. I don't know that was her mother's fault, but she was blaming so much of what was happening to her on her mother. She was so upset. She would just express it all the time. Yeah, because she knew that. She knew that, I think when some women are having issues with their fertility, that hearing that can be helpful or really frustrating to know that, because you want to feel like there are certain things that you can control in your life. Right. And when you find out that there's something that's outside of your control, in fact, there's so much outside of our control. We were all created by something, other people. We were all created by someone, right?
Yeah.
So there's a whole bunch of stuff from the very get-go of our life that was out of our control. And now we're just all doing the best job that we can to make it great now. So the seeds are tricky because there's an issue potentially with the quantity of them. And there's an issue with the quality of them. With men, it's, mobility, motility, are all their little tails working? Just looking at them like little tadpoles, are all their little parts functioning, and the fluids that they live in, are they able to nourish them and keep them sustained to make it to the egg? They got to swim through all that fluid to get there. And then the eggs, I always tell people, because I know stories of where people were way old and had kids and their ovarian reserve was super low and they still had a kid. So yeah, it's a factor. The quantity is a factor, but you only need one
exactly
to have a baby. Men have to shoot like millions of sperm out, and women just need that one great one. So I think for us, we have a really big responsibility as women to design the environment for success.
Right.
We're the curators.
Yeah. Not only for our own children, but for our grandchildren now.
Exactly. Yeah. We're big designers, whether it's happening consciously or unconsciously. We are big designers, and we've got to, pick the right mate. We've got to, make sure that we feel safe and happy, and that our life, because if you're taking care of a baby, you need to make sure that you're provided for, because you have a whole bunch of work you got to do for that baby.
Yeah.
Breastfeeding, you're going to have a little, other person chained to you for a while.
Absolutely. And yes, definitely mothers need to be supported. So let's move on now to Ritu, or season, because this is a very important factor. Can you tell us what Ayurveda refers to and why it's so important, what it's referring to here?
Yeah, the season is, God, I have to tell you a funny story about this, because I when I was thinking of season a lot when I was writing the book, I was thinking of Ritu Kala, right? So there's Ritu and then there's Kala. So Ritu's the season. It also means like, think about the word Ritu, ritual, Ritu. If you write them down, they're the same. If you say them, it's the same root. Yeah. So it's the Ritu are these seasonal routines that happen, okay, that happen naturally on the planet, or that we are putting in place to honor those seasonal changes that are pretty predictable generally, unless there's something, off in the cosmos. But it's this concept of routine and returning and cycles. And the Kala piece was actually, the Ritu Kala piece, Kala was actually in my mind more, to be honest, when I was writing this book. And Kala means season and time as well, but with a slightly different angle. Because the Kala is also the zeitgeist. And the Kala is also where you are in time, the present moment. And it's climate. It's so many different things. And for some reason, the Kala piece stuck more for me when I was writing this book. And there are these, and maybe it's because in times, we've had times of our lives where we've had stronger rituals, where you have dinner at the same time every day, however your life is structured when you were growing up, however you are now. There are times where you've had more structure or less structure, depending on what's going on with you and all the people in your inner sphere, your inner circle, your field. And then there are times where there's a lot of change going on, and it's harder to keep the rituals, though it's the rituals that keep you from talking about the elements, right? Flying out into space or getting blown by the vayu, by the air, by the wind, too much. So the Ritu is important from a big life perspective. And the Kala is important from a big life perspective, but they're also very important for your menstrual cycle if you're a woman, because your menstrual cycle is, I would say, probably the most literal definition of the season, the Ritu Kala, or like when in the cycle is the right time for you to have a child, or for you not to have a child, when in the cycle is the right time for you to have sex, basically. And what happens is women get so obsessed with having the baby that it's like this narrow focus, and they lose sight of the context of the whole of what's happening to them throughout the month. And so there's all these things that we do to try to, bring the focus back to that. A lot of women will pee on an ovulation strip, or there's lots of little devices and gadgets that you can use to tell when you're fertile. And there's also some really natural methods, like fertility awareness methods, and there's something called the Creighton method. There are different methods that women can start to pay attention to their own shifts in their body throughout the month. So the natural things that happen. Does the vaginal opening, for example, have more juiciness at certain times of the month than others? And there's, checking the cervical position. There's a bunch of things that you can do to check that. And then also when the period comes, which is essentially the time to shed what wasn't used for a baby in that cycle, from a reproductive standpoint, there's other biological benefits to having a menstrual cycle. But when that happens, that's so much information. Right. There is like a goldmine of information in that cycle, in that menstruation, the blood and how it comes out, when it comes out, what it looks like, the texture, what it feels like, everything. There's so much in there, and it really tells you what happened that month before or the last couple of months before. It's like a report card.
Mm-hmm.
So the season is it's really complex. And I think that the Ritu and, really paying attention to those natural cycles is really important. And I think it's a little bit of a challenge. When I read the Ayurvedic text, I try to look for the parts that are maybe relevant to the geography where they were written or the culture where they were written. So I try to, pick out those parts, because Ritu also has a definition of being the 6 seasons that happen in India. Mm-hmm. And every place you live is different, right? So the seasons have a little bit of a different rhythm to them depending on where you live. And so I think the real intuitive piece of being where you are in the present moment is to understand your seasons where you live. And then also understand your seasons of your body, because the Vata cycle is different than the Pitta cycle, is different than the Kapha cycle. And you want your body to function optimally. So if you have any imbalance, whether it's a Vata, Pitta, or Kapha imbalance, or combination of any of those, then you want to get those balanced out so that you have great conditions for your seed to potentially find a place to be planted.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so important for us to get to know, like you said, the rhythm of our body. And oftentimes for many women, the only point where they get really interested in their menstrual cycle is when they're trying to conceive, right? And then now they're learning, I ovulate these dates and so on. And, I would really recommend anyone, whether you're trying to get pregnant or not, getting to know your cycle is really important. Not only from what you're saying, Heather, it's a great teacher as to what's going on in our body. Just like we look at our bowel movements, women have this extra report card in their menstrual cycle to see what's going on in their body. But also, understanding your menstrual cycle in regards just your day-to-day activities, and knowing that your energies are different from week to week of the cycle, and knowing that your creativity is different and your attention span and so on. Like, our cycle affects everything in our life, and it's amazing. And I think for women to get curious about it and to really understand it is just a deeper connection to really understanding their own true nature.
Yes, and I'd love to share. I remember I studied with Dr. Sarita Shrestha out of Nepal. I know a lot of people in the Ayurvedic community have, at least in the U.S. And she told this really great story about, in her culture, how when a woman has her period, she's not expected to work on those days. And that because they live in multi-generational families, in multi-generational homes, that what'll happen is the other family members will kind of just pick up the slack on things that have to happen. And I don't know how that would work practically in like a company these days, right. But the women get this time off to rest. And so they view it, there's all this stuff about the red tent and whatever. If you want to say it's, women are sent to the tent when they get to a period, if you want to look at that as a bad thing, but I actually think you could look at it as a privilege and kind of a perk. If you are a creative person, because what she was saying, Dr. Shasta was saying, is that the women save all of their creative projects, and they have a room in the house that they have dedicated that they will go and spend their time in. They get to, do their knitting or their writing or whatever they got to do, that what is their creative outlet when they have their period. And I remember hearing that story, and it brought so much sweetness to the experience. Right. And it's really a cultural thing. And if you even think about the way that women or girls are taught about their periods in school, I mean, I remember that experience, and I remember we all just felt weird and embarrassed. And
yeah, it's strange. And we're told to hide it, like hide the tampon, hide the sanitary napkin. Really, it's a something to be hidden and not talked about.
Yeah. And so that's a part of that weird shame thing too that people have. And it is a private thing. It's certainly a private thing. And, it's sometimes can be quite uncomfortable, and you have more things you have to manage, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I got to take care of this thing that is like happening to me right now. So it's totally normal and natural that we would feel a little disrupted. And then obviously if a woman's having challenges with her cycle, having some pain, when the downward energy hits, this is the part that like is such a shame to me. I hear so many women in my practice get upset that they feel tired and heavy when they get their period. They get upset about it. And I'm like, wait a minute, it's just a state change. You actually need that to happen for the blood to come down.
Right. Right. And if we change our perspective on it, if we did this, took these few days to go and do our creative activities at a time when we're very intuitive, when we're starting our menstrual cycle, it would really change rather than going against nature and trying to push on and work and continue life as normal. If we actually listened to nature and took some time off. And it's funny, I just did a podcast with Dr. Sujata, on menopause, and she said the same story, that during the time of the period, women would go and do their creative activities, and it was just understood that this was a time they needed to rest. And that's such a beautiful thing, so this would shift that thinking for those of us, who are thinking that the cycle is such a pain, the time of the month, that it's just something that we just have to get through. Like shifting our perception of it to think of it as a time for a retreat and a time to redo those creative activities we enjoy would really be a huge game changer.
Yeah, it would be wonderful.
It would be wonderful. So Heather, I'd love to talk next on the most important factors is soil. So
yes.
What soil is Ayurveda referring to here? Yeah.
So the Ksetra, like you mentioned earlier, is the soil or the field. And the uterus is the most direct translation for that. And obviously the uterus that's where the egg will implant. Where the zygote, where the sperm and the egg have already come together, hopefully in the fallopian tube. And travel down into the uterus. And that, that doesn't always happen in the fallopian tube. Sometimes it can happen in the uterus as well. Right. You want it to happen probably more in the fallopian tube. And then the implantation is happening in the uterus. And then that's where everything starts to grow. That's where the placenta starts to develop. And that's where all the vasculature comes together to start feeding the blood and the energy and the rasa and the rakta, all that to the baby and growing. And so the metaphor for that is the soil. The metaphor for that is you've got, a garden in your backyard and you're planting a seed in there, and you want to make sure you got the right kind of soil for the right seed. And this is what's so interesting to me. And this is, I think, why health is so challenging in general and why Ayurveda is so important, because we all think we're supposed to be the same. We all think, but if you look at me and you look at you and you look at everybody in the world, we're all different. We all have different noses and different eyes and different hair and we're supposed to be like that. And we cannot know what a potential baby will need before this baby is here. We cannot know it. We can't know it until that baby's right there with us. Right. But what we can know is we can know what we need. We can know how to create our body in a way where it's most healthy so that our uterus is functioning really well. That's the litmus test. You can't control what's happening with the baby. You can only control your own body and giving it what it needs and paying attention to what your particular constitution needs in a given environment, in a given season, so that quality of those tissues, the uterus has muscle in it, so it's got mamsa. The uterus gets rasa. The uterus gets rakta. So, as part of the menstrual cycle, the uterus has the nerves. So it's got maja. The uterus has so many things, right? So and then it also has these extra things that have come in, the seeds, right? Mm-hmm. So the care of the field. Now we could make that the microcosm. And if you want to take field out to the macrocosm, the field is, the uterus is in a body. So you're part of the field. Your overall body as a woman is part of the field. Mm. And then your partner is in the field with you. If you live with this partner, you're around this person the most. They're part of your field. They're a close part of your field. They're going to really strongly influence your state, your body, all the way down to that little tiny uterus in your belly. Mm-hmm. And then your community where you live, your job, everything is going out from this center and just go wider and wider and wider. Everything affects you all the way out to the stars and the planets, mm-hmm. and everything's coming into converging in this one little uterus to, is it healthy or is it not healthy? Is it, right? Yeah. So that's really the field. I think uterus is the most literal, but it's everything is affecting it.
Absolutely. Everything in our life has an effect on our health and well-being. And that's where we need to, like you're saying, zoom out and look at what's around us to really make sure that we have this field that's really nurturing and nourishing for this new life to come in too. And
I love the way you said that. Mm-hmm. Zoom out. I like it. Right. Zooming in and zooming out. Yes.
Well, that's what I really think of Ayurveda. I think Ayurveda is a zooming out. In the West, in modern medicine, we have this zooming in, this reductionist medicine, which has amazing technology and we've made amazing advances. But what I love about Ayurveda is it zooms out and looks at the bigger picture of everything.
Yeah.
I think once we get stuck in the minutia, we miss everything else that's going on around. I think
that's beautiful.
Yeah. So talking about nurturing environment, the final essential factor is Ambu, or water, or nutrition. So what do we need to understand about the importance of Ambu?
Yeah, the purpose of water in fertility is for mixing and for lubrication. Mm. So mixing, lubrication, and, the sperm swims through water. Even the egg, when it's released from the ovary, it goes through water to get into the fallopian tube. And it's sort of like the ocean inside there. And you get all these little, things, they call them the fimbriae that kind of push or tickle the egg into the, through the water into the fallopian tube. So it's like, imagine a little, diver under some little sea creature getting a little nudge by a kelp or something, right. under the water. Uh-huh. But the egg is passive, and it gets that nudge through the water. It sort of allows it to swim through from these little fingers, these little finger-like projections, and carried through this water. So if there was no water there, just the physics of it, the physics of fertility is, how would the sperm get to the egg? Mm-hmm. It would get stuck. If it dried out, it would get stuck somewhere in there.
Right.
Right. So you need the water to be plentiful. Now, water's tricky because, yes, it's for mixing, but I also, and it's also what carries the hormones in the body. Mm-hmm. So that, everything's traveling through water, all the information, everything's traveling through water from a nutrient perspective, from a nourishment perspective in the body, and that support perspective. We have other ways that we get information and energy that maybe don't necessarily come through water. But for the nourishing and the nutrient perspective, everything comes through the Ambu, the water. And the tricky thing about water is getting the right amount for you, because this is, part of the programming issue that I think a lot of people have. One is you get too busy, you forget to drink water, get dehydrated. Two, another possibility, you're one of those people that is just so good at, following your health routines that you carry the bottle of water around with you everywhere and you're constantly drinking it. Right. and then you're overwatering, and you're diluting your enzymes. You're diluting your Agni. You're diluting your, fire element in your body. And you're essentially diluting the hormonal transfers. You're diluting so much that you can actually have too much water.
Yeah.
So you have to really figure out what the right amount of water is for your body. And so you can get too much or too little. And it's just so great to get that balance, because then you get in time more. You are aligned with time more when you can align your water element.
Beautiful. And such a huge, 70% of our body is made up of water. It's a major criteria.
Yeah. And the brain, everything needs the water.
Yeah.
I mean, everything, your whole body.
Yeah, absolutely.
Your lymphatic system, the rasa, everything. So those are the pieces. And just like you would water a plant, you have to figure out the amount of water every plant needs, because the cactus needs less water than some IV. And they also need, like, the field might be different. They might need different types of soil, and they might grow in a different season at a different time of year. They might grow flowers at certain times of year versus others. And their seeds will look different.
Right. Like the plant that you tried to grow on your balcony at the start of your book, which wasn't designed for a balcony. What was the name of the plant?
Oh, God, that plant. I loved it so much. I saw this plant. It was called the red apple aptenia. And I saw it in a nursery, and I bought it. I said, I have to have this. And the woman, I asked her where to plant it at the nursery. I said, where do I plant this? I said, I have a balcony. I really want this. It's the only place I could plant. Something outside was on my balcony because I lived in the city. I said, I really want this plant. And because it reminded me of my mother. That's why. Yeah. I was like, I need my mommy. And I took this plant home and I put it hanging out of, like, a hanging planter, rather than, it was supposed to be ground cover. It needed to be low to the ground to hover and like get the coolness of the earth and things like that. But I had it raised up high off the ground, and it was just in full sun all day. And the thing it would not die, but it just did not look great. It was really struggling, but it would not die. It kept living, even though I could see it was like it had been, radiated, basically. Wow. And eventually I did have to just, let it die, because I had no solution, and I had actually no place to plant it. And, I think if I was a good plant parent, I would have found another home for it, because I wasn't really in the right environment for that particular plant. But that's what happens with people too, right? We think that we're supposed to be in some environment. We don't do well in that environment. And then we're sitting there trying to, figure out how to be better in the environment. How can I keep being better? How can I keep being, make myself better? But then sometimes it's just, you're in the wrong environment.
Exactly. Or in the wrong relationship, or in the wrong job, or in the wrong, it could be correlated to anything, but going against our true nature, essentially.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah. So I think we can really see, Heather, from the 4 essential factors for conception and for fertility, is that preconception period is really of paramount importance. And I've talked about this before in the podcast, and the importance of preparing. And so, you can answer those questions about, am I in the right environment? Am I in the right place? Am I with the right partner? Is this the right situation to bring a child into? Because I think this preconception period is really about, tending to the soil, tending to the field, the nutrition, right? Making sure that the Ritu, the season, is functioning properly, and so on. Can you share with us a little bit about the importance of preconception, and maybe advice you would give to somebody, say a 35-year-old who's trying to get pregnant? What advice would you give to that person in the preconception stage?
Yeah. First, I would say relax and don't rush it. Even if feel like you're late to the game.
Right.
And I think that's hard to do. And I think a lot of women will, try for however long they're supposed to, try to get pregnant, and then they'll go to get IVF, or first they'll go to IUI, and then they'll go to IVF, and that whole cycle starts. But I would say, stop focusing on the fertility. Stop focusing on you getting pregnant. Focus on you getting healthy. Right. Because if you focus on you getting healthy, then your fertility is going to be top notch. So that's really the piece, I would say. And that's why Ayurveda is just so awesome, because we can help people get healthy.
Yeah.
Truly healthy.
Yeah.
Truly, truly healthy. We have great tools to do this. And, there's maybe some best practices about how long you should prepare and things like that. But every woman is different, right? Some people are going to be more aligned than others and, have less healing work to do or more healing work to do. And in fact, you don't have to wait until you're fully healed on something to get pregnant either. I had a woman contact me. She had a fibroid and she was, worried about getting pregnant with a fibroid. And she ended up getting pregnant again because she had a miscarriage and she was worried about getting pregnant again. But, you can still, even if you're imperfect, you can still get pregnant in a lot of cases. So it's not like you need to get to this like perfect place, but you do want to make sure that your body is and your relationship and your home and everything is in the greatest condition as possible before you have a child, because everything's growing from there. That's ground zero for like the future.
Right.
Your life, your future life. And your baby is going to complicate everything when you get pregnant. And there's so much more chaos and things to manage. And the stress for most people increases when you have a child because you just have more things to manage. Or the potential for stress, I should say, not necessarily the stress, but the potential for stress increases. And so you want to make sure you're in a good position when that happens, and you're just going to be happier and healthier down the road if you do that. So first, get your body healthy, get your mind healthy, your emotions, really, really, really tap into your emotions, especially your emotions. And that's why I think the doshas are so healthy are interesting because that helps people understand their emotions better.
Exactly.
And when we learn about ourselves, so take the time, take a minimum of 3 months. That is a tiny speck of time and tiny, tiny speck of time and possibly not enough. Take 12 months, take a year. Take a year to really, really, really get your body healthy, receptive, all your channels clear out the shrotas, and also make all the shrotas resilient. Get the immune system strong, but not too strong, right?
Yes.
And just create your body as an open channel. So start to look at yourself as designing yourself. And do that for a year. And I think it's really helpful to work with a practitioner. You can read books, you can read lots of books to figure out how to do that. And in fact, I wrote my book, I would say it's like level 1, right? Of trying to understand yourself before you conceive. It's level 1 because if you do have something that's requires a deeper healing and you need to get panchakarma or, go through an extended cleansing period, because there's ama or because there's, some kapha or something or pitta, then you need to take additional measures. But the book that I wrote is really, here's the entry point for you. And if you do need something deeper, you will need to go and seek that,
right? That
healing work.
Yeah. So important to get it tailored to you as well. And to really have someone give you that support as you're going through this process. And I think also very important, if you have a partner, that they go through it with you as well.
Oh God, absolutely. Because we know that the male, it's not just that we need the male seed healthy. That's also a narrow goal. We also need, if we're going to cohabitate, we need that partner, assuming you have a male partner. That's not the case for everybody, right? But assuming you have a male partner and you're doing this naturally, you want your partner to be there healthy with you.
Right, exactly. And understanding it, having a deep understanding of it and from the Ayurvedic approach, and having a deeper connection as well.
Yeah, really.
It's just a beautiful process to go through, I think, before a couple, if there is a couple going forward to conceive, I think it's a beautiful process to go through.
Yeah, it's just rite of passage, and this is part of a lot of our routines in society are disrupted for various reasons. And, this is where religions are typically the ones that, bring in a lot of routine for people.
Right.
And we don't, there's been a decline, at least in the US, in all the religions. The religiously unaffiliated category has grown a lot. And I think this is where there's a huge opportunity for Ayurveda. We're not a religion, but we do offer a way for people to study themselves with reverence and to start to develop healthy rituals in their lives. I think we all need to take a very active role in that right now. And I think if we start to do that, we're going to start to build a better culture even.
Yes. Yes. I think with that comes more compassion and more of an understanding of the connection to the greater world.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's been a pleasure, Heather, to chat with you. And, I'd love for you now to tell the listeners where they can find out more about you, your wonderful new book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility, a natural approach to getting pregnant, and your offerings.
Yes, you can find me on my website, which is heathergrzych.com, and my last name is spelled Grzych. So website is heathergrzych.com. The book, The Ayurvedic Guide to Fertility, is available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and IndieBound. And so if you're in the US, it's available in print form. If you're not in the US, print might be a little bit behind, but you can get it on Kindle everywhere in the world right now. And you can also check me out on Instagram at Heather Grzych or on Facebook at Grzych Heather. And the last thing I'll mention is, I do offer virtual consultations for either women solo or with their partners. And I'll be offering a training on the 4 fertility factors starting in June of 2020.
Wonderful.
Yeah.
And people can find out all about that on your website.
Yes.
Fab. Okay, great. And I will put all those links in the show notes. So just head on over to the show notes and we'll get you over to Heather. Heather, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much. I really enjoyed the conversation today.
Me too. I've loved talking with you. It's been so wonderful. I loved your questions and I would love to speak again.
Yeah, we'll definitely have to have you back because we could delve deep into many other paths of this conversation.
Yes, let me know.
Wonderful. Okay, Heather, thanks a million and we'll chat again soon.
Take care.
Take care. Bye-bye. I hope you enjoyed that conversation with Heather, and please check out the show notes for a link to Heather's website to find out more about her offerings and, of course, her new book. If you think that this episode will be helpful to any family or friends, please share it with them so we can spread this wonderful wisdom of Ayurveda. And if you haven't already done so, please subscribe to the podcast and maybe rate and review it wherever you listen to your podcast. I would truly appreciate it. You can support the podcast via my Patreon site, and I'll put that link in the show notes also. You can find out more about my online services, cleanses and consultations, and online educational programs over on elementshealingandwellbeing.com. And again, you'll find all that info in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in. Take good care of yourself, be well, and ciao for now.